Welcome to the Business, Finance, and Comedy Show. I am a guy surrounded by money. Today I'm interviewing Carolyn Holzman of American Way Media. Carolyn, one of the things that you do is monitoring how Google is indexing pages. Can you tell us how you do that?
Yes, I can. Um, Thank you, Guys Surrounded with Money, for inviting me to talk about something I really love to talk about. I test Google every day by publishing new content, and I have special keywords in there that let me look. I look for them, and that tells me primarily, did the content make it through the simple pass? And did it make it through that second pass, so that I can identify the different stages of a page?
If people discover their content is not being indexed, assuming no manual penalty, what should they do?
Well, I think first off, the idea also is that indexed and serving are two different things. And primarily, when people tell me that they have a problem with indexing, I try and get them to describe how they came to that conclusion. Because a lot of times there are issues in Search Console that will say they were not indexed. But then a lot of times it says in there that it's indexed, and they can't figure out why they can't find their content by its keywords. And what they're really describing is a problem with their content being served. So it creates a little bit of a subtle distinction, but it's one that really, as you know, comes down to dollars and cents. If people can't find your content, it's going to be hard for you to make a living online.
Let's say a page is more time sensitive and needs to be updated every few days. Apart from going into Search Console, how would we get the crawler to come back more often?
What's interesting, I do think that there is data out there that the more often you change your page, Google, it's like it trains itself to come back. One of the first things it'll look at is that sitemap. So it's hugely important, I think, for people to have sitemaps that also have that section that says, when the last change to that page was made. Now, Google will figure that out over time, but anything we can do to help them to quickly get them over that, I just recommend you do go ahead and make the effort to do that. And then as you keep making changes, it will start to expect that when it hits your sitemap and it sees a different date and time, it's definitely going to crawl.
Are indexing services worth it, or are you better off posting a link to your page on social media to get it to index?
That's a great question. I think this is again my favorite topic. There are people who think that indexers as third parties have found some separate secret door that the rest of us don't have access to. And I have yet to see any data that tells me there's a separate door into Google. So if you're using an indexer, you might want to know, like, generally what's the method. A very popular thing right now is to use the Google Indexing API and to sort of wrap it in some automation, so that we're not sitting there having to do what we have to do in Search Console, which is like manually submit all of these URLs. And that is one way. I do test the request. Like, if you go through Google Search Console, do you have a better chance than if you use the indexing API? So I also test for that as well.
Are you a fan of eliminating unnecessary pages to help Google crawl the most valuable pages? I probably wouldn't be in favor of doing this, but perhaps you have a different view.
You know, I I think there are other reasons to remove pages, but to create less, content for them to come is probably not is probably not a technique I would recommend to encourage Google to come to the site. I would say make sure you have a sitemap, make sure you have an up-to-date robots text file, help them out and make sure you put your sitemap in that robots text file. Since they crawl that, Google is a very well-behaved bot in that if you tell them you want them to go over here or you don't want them to go over here, they 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 follow your instructions. So those two files are not, in my view, optional if you are trying to get Google to keep coming back and crawling your content. And I would say I'd put more attention on those files than I would on removing any content that you didn't think was as high value to your business.
Do you think the rise of AI content has caused problems in indexing?
I think it's caused problems in serving versus indexing. When I've seen AI produce content, a lot of the times, let's say some of us hit the same topic. So I feel like from what I've seen, it's not so much that it's AI content, it's that Google interprets it almost as syndicated content. If you're following the same lines, like we talk about press releases going through a filter so that Google only has a couple of versions of that press release. And I think they've gotten pretty good with their own use of artificial intelligence to be able to recognize that, let's say there's 50,000 pages on the same topic and being able to go like, these are too similar to each other. So we're going to treat them almost like they're press releases. They're not on the same domain. They don't care, but it's kind of like if they've got that topic covered to that level, there's no reason that they should have to serve that as well. So they'll index it, but they very likely will not serve it.
I know that e-commerce sites sometimes have problems with crawling unnecessary pages. What do you think they could do to eliminate Google crawling things like add to cart links?
That's going to be probably something you can handle in your HT access file. I had a great conversation once with Ted about the parameter tool when they retired it out of Search Console. And I think really working to identify what you can limit and say, I don't want you to go there. So you can hit it in the robots text file as well as the HT access, and just make sure that they're not wasting their time, especially if you set canonicals. That's the other piece to that is if you don't set your canonicals and you have all of those parameter links on your page, you're going to get, this thing where the bot just keeps looping around. And then I'm also very strongly in favor of reducing any kind of duplicate content. And that's exactly what those things are when you have all these links that ultimately lead to the same page.
When it comes to testing on page, like if you get a boost if you do a particular thing to the content, do you scientifically test this and how are you doing so?
Well, that's kind of like what we're talking here now is about my liberation as an SEO. So when I started testing, I think I have my before testing SEO experience and I have my post testing SEO experience. And before, I think we would throw things at the wall and see what stuck. After testing, it was very different because, and let me also say, and you're probably aware of this too, how we tested back in 2015 is not the same as how we test right now because Google changed and they introduced a lot of things that made it very difficult for us to isolate pages and have them stay in some order that they weren't like constantly flipping around. So there's two parts to the answer, which is, before Google introduced the volatility, it was pretty easy to get an answer to questions that were related to, if I change this, how will this work? And then now it's challenging because you have to do it in more of a live environment, a live field environment. So we used to like take one domain, create 10 pages on the same domain, and then run it. That gave us a larger data set. So then we'd run it and then we get our answers, but it's not really possible right now to take 10 pages on the same domain and test for them, because they kind of have to be more similar. And once you hit a certain degree of similarity, then it works kind of like that press release thing that I mentioned and duplicate content. It's like, why should we even serve this? So these days, it's almost like you have to maybe find certain things that you can test on other people's sites, but primarily going for like the hardcore, create 10 pages, make 9 of them the same and 1 of them different to test a factor. It's a different environment right now. So you have to get a little creative to figure out what's going to be a boost.
What are some tests that you have done which surprised you?
Oh, sometimes they all do. I think a lot of times, and you probably were there when some of us found out that we thought we were testing one thing, and the surprise was we were really testing keyword density. So that can be a surprise. I think there was one particular test that I had done with some images, and I had changed some of the information inside the images. And I was actually trying to do a keyword density test with that. And I think the surprise was, at the time, they sorted out according to their highest density on down. And that was a real surprise, a pleasant surprise.
What motivated you to start a SEO podcast?
That's a good question. I felt like I didn't want to do, what stopped me from doing it for a long time was that I needed to do something that I could contain my time with, and yet at the same time provide something that wasn't already out there. So it took me a little while to come up with the format. It's a short format, not very long. And a friend of mine who was talking with me and working with me on, she's also in the business. And she said, Carolyn, I think you just have to make it real, like do something. And so I decided, okay. And literally within like 5 hours, I had the first episode, and I published it January 1st, 2021.
How have you grown the reach of your podcast?
It's not necessarily everybody's cup of tea. I'll give you that. The lack of interviews means, there's not a lot of back and forth interviewing each other. But it's pretty much been, I think, by word of mouth. And I've been pushing it out on social media and talking about it. And what has not hurt it too badly is SEMrush listed it on its top 10 SEO podcasts to listen to. So I thought that was nice to sort of be a dark horse in that group.
Who are your favorite SEO influencers?
Influencers. I really am okay. There are some people who are they talk SEO, but they probably haven't really had their hands on a site for a long time. So I really like those that are looking in the SERPs and looking at things and testing things, and showing their work. And so, of course, a big influence on my testing has been Lee Witcher and Ted Kubitis. And not to mention, I was brought into testing by Kyle Roof. And that was, like I say, that was like the freedom, the liberation. Like whenever you had a question, could you find an answer? And everywhere I looked, I found opinion. And so that's, people who talk like that, who talk about, they're not trying to sell you on themselves. They're selling you on a method of finding out things. And that's what really draws my attention.
Have you done SEO for any weird niches?
Weird niches. For me, a weird niche is something where you do something that's really useful to humanity, but there's no keywords for it. And, that's kind of, I think, I've come across a few like that, or a few have approached me, and it's like what they do is so esoteric that there's no search volume for specifically that. There might be huge search volume for, larger, the same thing, but at a larger topic, but then they don't really have the budget to compete at that, high level topic. They really could compete down if there were keywords that, less people were looking at, but were more targeted to what they did. So that to me was weird. That's a weird topic.
You do some work for a TV channel. Can you tell us about what you do there?
I did take SEO Fight Club and turn that into a Amazon Fire channel and Roku channel. And that was a time when they, let individual publishers push things out that way. And it was very, very fun, I have to say, to do that. And so I've done some TV channels, done some Alexa skills on the little voice assistants. And for the longest time, I was also looking at trying to come up with voice SEO strategy. And right now, the way the technology is, I have high hopes with where artificial intelligence might be able to bring us a little closer to that. But I think we need to be able to get better at tracking that, having it, there's no click involved. So it's a little bit of a challenge to encourage people to go beyond just the digital online thing. But the media that's out there is pretty exciting.
Where can people follow you?
I have American Way Media on Facebook. The podcast Confessions of an SEO is pretty much everywhere you can find a podcast. And I'm I'm in and out on Twitter. But you can always find me there, usually doing something, saying something about not nice about Google, I guess.
I would like to thank Carolyn for the interview. People watching can like, comment, share, subscribe, and whatever else you do to videos if you're watching in the future. If you don't find notifications annoying, you can turn notifications on.